Picture this. It's 2 a.m., 15 degrees outside, and your toes aren't tingling. They're gone, sacrificed so your heart can keep beating. In 30 minutes, frostbite turns permanent. Black skin, dead nerves, amputation. Yet some survive this night after night. No shelter, no hospital. Just knowledge, grit, and the frozen ground. A veteran on the streets of Chicago showed me a trick that saved his fingers for 5 winters. It costs $0, takes 20 seconds, and by the end of this video, you'll know more about surviving extreme cold than most emergency room physicians. This isn't just about enduring the cold, it's about a high-stakes application of physics and human biology, where every decision, from where you sit to how you tie your shoes, determines whether you wake up with all your digits intact. Ground insulation, ground contact in freezing temperatures, isn't just uncomfortable. It's physics working against you at 25 times the speed of air. When you lie on concrete or frozen dirt at 15 degrees, that surface pulls heat from your body faster than you can generate it. Your core temperature starts dropping within minutes, not hours. The cold doesn't seep in gradually like most people imagine. It gets yanked out, conducted straight through clothing, through skin, into a thermal vacuum that never gets satisfied. This is why hypothermia kills people at 50-degree temperatures if they're lying on cold ground. Not because 50 degrees is inherently deadly, but because the ground underneath them is stealing heat faster than their metabolism can replace it. Veterans of the street learned this lesson the expensive way, back when they still had all their toes. Now they know the first rule isn't about what you wear, it's about what you sleep on. Cardboard is the gold standard of street insulation, not just any cardboard and not just one layer. 3 to 4 layers of corrugated cardboard pulled from recycling dumpsters behind grocery stores are the minimum requirement for a safe night. These are completely free if you know when the collection trucks come. The science is simple but critical. Those corrugated ridges trap dead air in thousands of tiny pockets, and dead air is one of the best insulators on Earth. A single layer does almost nothing. 2 layers starts to matter. 3 to 4 layers can create a 10 to 15 degree temperature difference between your body and that frozen concrete. Research on cold weather sleeping shows cardboard insulation reduces the number of times people wake up from cold by roughly 40%. That's not comfort. That's survival measured in sleep cycles your body desperately needs to maintain core temperature. But cardboard only works if it stays dry and maintains its structure, which brings us to the catch that separates people who make it through winter from people who end up in emergency rooms. Wet cardboard compresses flat. Compressed cardboard loses those air pockets. No air pockets means you're back to sleeping on frozen ground with maybe a quarter inch of damp pulp between you and conductive heat loss. The veteran workaround is ugly but effective. Plastic sheeting underneath the cardboard. Garbage bags work. That blue tarp someone threw away works. Anything waterproof that creates a moisture barrier between ground dampness and your cardboard layer is essential. It's not elegant, but neither is Frostbite. You're engineering a sleep system on a $0 budget, and every material choice is a physics problem with your fingers and toes as the variables. Gear scavenging, the $0 survival kit. Survival engineering requires materials, and on a $0 budget, those materials must be scavenged. This isn't just about looking in trash cans. It's about knowing the discard cycles of an urban environment. Construction sites in cities like Chicago and Detroit are gold mines for Tyvek, a material that is both waterproof and breathable, making it the ultimate scavenged bivvy material. High-end retail districts often discard heavy-duty packing foam or bubble wrap, which provides even better R values than cardboard. Knowing the difference between open-cell and closed-cell foam is a distinction that can save a life. Open-cell foam, like what you find in a couch cushion, is a death trap in winter because it acts like a sponge for moisture. Once it's wet, it's useless. Closed-cell foam, used in shipping electronics or as floor underlayment, doesn't absorb water. A veteran will walk past a pile of discarded cushions, but will fight for a single sheet of closed-cell packing foam. This scavenging also extends to thermal mass. Finding a spot near a steam vent or a building's exhaust fan provides a constant source of warm air. However, these spots are highly contested and often dangerous due to the risk of vent gas or simply being too visible to police. The strategy then becomes passive thermal mass, sleeping against a brick wall that faced the sun all day. The bricks hold heat long into the night, providing a slight but consistent thermal advantage. But cardboard, foam, and thermal mass only work if your body heat stays trapped in the first place, which is where most people's intuition completely fails them. The layering paradox. Why more clothing can kill you now. Here's where it gets interesting, because everything you think you know about staying warm is backwards. Most people see someone wearing 6 or 7 layers of clothing and assume they're doing it right. More layers equals more warmth, right? Wrong. Dead wrong, and in sub-freezing temperatures that mistake costs fingers. When clothing layers are tight against your skin, when that jacket is zipped up snug and those sleeves are pulled down firm, you're not trapping warmth, you're cutting off blood flow to your extremities. Your fingers and toes are the furthest points from your heart, already getting the weakest circulation. Already the first body parts your system will sacrifice when core temperature drops. Tight clothing accelerates that process by constricting the blood vessels that are trying to deliver warm blood to those distant regions. A veteran on the street in Denver told me once he lost 3 toes because he wore boots one size too small. Not frostbite from exposure, but frostbite from compression cutting off circulation while he slept. 3 layers of loose clothing will keep you warmer than 6 tight layers because the actual insulation isn't the fabric, it's the air trapped between those fabric layers. Think about it. Fabric itself is just woven material with some thickness. Air, when it's trapped and can't move, has an R value that exceeds most synthetic insulations. Each loose layer you add creates another air gap, another thermal buffer zone that your body warms up and maintains. The measurement works out to roughly 3 to 5 degrees of protection per properly spaced layer. A loose base layer, a loose middle layer, a loose outer shell, that's 15 degrees of buffer you've just engineered. But you can't buy this solution at a high-end outdoor store for hundreds of dollars. You're getting it at Goodwill for $2 to $5 per item, or free from donation bins if you know which churches and community centers have them. The counterintuitive part that kills people is this. Tight clothing feels warmer initially because it's pressed against your skin, creating that immediate sensation of insulation. Loose clothing feels drafty and cold at first because air is moving in those gaps. But 30 minutes into a 15-degree night, that tight clothing has cut circulation and your fingers are going numb. Meanwhile, those air gaps in loose clothing have warmed up and created a stable thermal envelope. Veterans remove all elastic cuffs and drawstrings that create pressure points. If your wrists or ankles have red marks from fabric, you're already restricting blood flow. What happens next, though, has nothing to do with fabric thickness or how much you're wearing. The sweat trap, wet clothing's 20x heat loss multiplier. The silent killer in cold weather survival is something your body does automatically, something you can't stop even if you know it's happening. You sweat. Not the dripping, obvious sweat of a hot summer day, but the invisible moisture your skin releases during any physical activity. This is the vapor that evaporates normally but has nowhere to go when you're wrapped in multiple clothing layers. Walk 3 blocks to get to your sleeping spot, and your base layer is damp. Climb a fence to access a wind-protected location, and your core has heated up, moisture has formed, and you don't even feel it yet. This is the hidden problem that separates rookies from veterans. Understanding that movement creates moisture, and moisture is a 20-fold multiplier on heat loss. Not 20%, 20 times. Wet clothing loses 90% of its insulation value immediately. That loose layering system you just engineered becomes functionally useless the moment perspiration saturates the inner layer. The common mistake people make is keeping all layers on when they're active because it's cold outside, so they think they need to stay bundled up. Wrong. The correct method, the one that keeps people alive through February in Minneapolis and Chicago, is removing your outer layer when you're moving and relayering when you become stationary. It feels completely backwards. It feels dangerously cold to take off a jacket when it's 15 degrees outside. But you're choosing between feeling cold for 10 minutes and sleeping in damp clothing that will freeze against your skin once you stop moving. A pack of dry socks costs $3 to $5 and is worth more than a $50 jacket if those socks stay dry and the jacket gets wet. Veterans carry spare socks in waterproof bags, Ziploc freezer bags, doubled up for durability. The statistics are brutal. Clothing loses 90% of its insulation power when wet. You've just turned your carefully engineered thermal system into a damp rag pressed against your skin, pulling heat out through evaporative cooling and conductive transfer simultaneously. The catch is you can't always change clothes. There's no privacy in a public park, no changing room in an alley, and no locker to store dry clothes. So the solution is a vapor barrier. Plastic bags over your feet inside your shoes. Bread bags or grocery bags prevent foot moisture from soaking into your socks. It feels weird, it sounds makeshift, and it absolutely works because it stops sweat from saturating the one layer between your feet and frostbite. Moisture management, the newspaper insulation technique. Your body is a moisture generator. Even when you're not sweating from activity, even when you're lying perfectly still trying to sleep, your skin releases water vapor constantly. It's called insensible perspiration, and it's happening whether you're aware of it or not. In a heated home, that moisture evaporates into room air and disappears. In multiple clothing layers at 15 degrees, that moisture has nowhere to go. It condenses on the coldest surface it encounters, which is usually your outer layer. The side effect is that you wake up and your outer clothing is damp, not soaking wet, just damp. And you think that's fine, it'll dry out. Except it won't, because daytime temperatures are still below freezing and your clothes stay damp until evening, then refreeze overnight with additional moisture added. This is the cumulative dampness buildup that kills people slowly over the course of a week. The solution method that veterans use is newspaper, not for reading, for stuffing. 20 to 30 sheets of newspaper crumpled loosely and stuffed between your mid-layer and outer layer. Newspaper does two things. It absorbs moisture vapor before it can condense into liquid, and it adds additional insulation through trapped air in the crumpled structure. It's free from recycle bins, light enough to carry a stack, and replaceable when it gets too damp to function. The product specifics matter. Tightly wadded newspaper doesn't work because you've compressed out the air pockets. Loosely crumpled maintains structure while maximizing moisture absorption. Veterans also look for drying opportunities that most people ignore. A sunny afternoon where they can spread gear over a dark asphalt surface that absorbs solar heat. A few hours in a laundromat if they can scrape together the change. Stuffing shoes with dry newspaper every night isn't just about insulation, it's about wicking. Leather and synthetic boots trap moisture against the foot, and without a way to pull that moisture out, the boot itself becomes a cold sink. The ventilation-insulation balance is the hardest thing for a rookie to learn. You need enough airflow to let moisture escape, but not so much that you lose your heat envelope. It's a fine line that often takes a full winter to master. Extremity protection, the 30-minute frostbite window. Here's the thing most people don't realize about frostbite. It's a liar. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't give you warning signs. It doesn't send pain signals to tell you to protect yourself. What frostbite does is kill the nerves first, before the tissue damage becomes visible. You lose feeling in your fingers or toes, and your brain interprets that as, okay, they're just cold and numb, I'll warm them up later. Except there is no later. The window for prevention is about 20 to 30 minutes of exposure, depending on temperature and wind. After that, tissue freezing has begun at the cellular level. Ice crystals are forming in your flesh, and the damage is permanent before you ever see black skin or blistered fingertips. The myth that kills people is thinking, I'll feel frostbite starting so I can prevent it. No, you won't. The first symptom of serious frostbite is numbness, which feels identical to harmless cold. By the time you notice something's wrong, you're already injured. The actual working method that keeps people with all their digits is scheduled warming cycles every 20 to 30 minutes, no exceptions. Set an internal timer, count minutes obsessively, whatever it takes. Every 20 minutes your hands come off the frozen ground, out of wet gloves if you have them, and get tucked into your armpits. Alternating hands, 15 minutes each, is a rhythm you maintain all night if you have to. Chemical hand warmers cost about $1 each and last 8 hours, making them worth their weight in gold if you can afford them. Wool gloves run $5 to $10 at thrift stores, but veteran technique doesn't rely on having money. Veteran technique is tucking your hands inside your shirt against your abdomen where your core body heat is strongest, rotating them constantly. The sensory description is important. Your fingers will feel like wooden blocks before damage begins. Not painful, not burning, just wooden, stiff and distant, and not quite connected to you. That's your nervous system shutting down as tissue temperature drops below safe levels. If you wait for pain, you've waited too long. 700 homeless people die annually in the United States from hypothermia, and a significant percentage of survivors lose fingers, toes, parts of ears and noses to frostbite. In New York City alone, an average of 15 cold weather deaths occur per year. These aren't statistics. These are people who didn't maintain the warming cycle, who fell asleep because exhaustion beat vigilance, or who trusted the myth that their body would warn them. The safety countermeasure is brutal in its simplicity. Never remove gloves or hand covering in sub-freezing temperatures unless you're immediately replacing them with another warming method. But all this hand protection means nothing if you're sleeping in the wrong spot, because the invisible force multiplier in cold weather survival isn't temperature, it's wind. Location engineering, wind chills 50 down degree-wise, and temperature drop. Here's something most people never consider until they've spent a night outside in winter. Wind chill isn't just a number weather reports throw around to sound dramatic. It's a real, measurable effect that can drop the perceived temperature by 30 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. 20 degrees with no wind is survivable with decent clothing and ground insulation. 20 degrees with 20-mile-per-hour wind becomes -10 degrees on exposed skin, and frostbite risk jumps from unlikely to probable in 15 minutes. This is where location engineering becomes a survival skill. Veterans don't just find a spot and settle in. They're reading the environment for wind blocks, thermal advantages, and structural protection. Building corners create wind shadows. Deep doorways block air movement. Alley walls perpendicular to prevailing wind cut wind speed by 60% or more. Highway overpasses provide overhead protection and vertical surfaces that block horizontal wind. A wind-blocked location can feel 15 to 20 degrees warmer than an exposed position 50 feet away, and that difference is the gap between maintaining body temperature and sliding into hypothermia. The cost analysis for improving a position is minimal. A reflective emergency blanket runs $2 to $5 at any camping store, sometimes less at dollar stores. That crinkly mylar sheet everyone associates with disaster victims isn't just about warmth. It's a wind block that weighs 2 ounces and folds into a pocket. My grandfather survived Depression winters in North Dakota by sleeping in a 3-sided shed that blocked north wind. Not heated, not insulated, just wind protection and a roof over his head, which he said was worth more than a heavy coat. The comparison measurement that matters: perceived temperature with full wind exposure versus perceived temperature in a blocked location at the same air temperature. 15 to 20 degrees. That's not comfort, that's viability. But here's the legal and social complication. Every genuinely protected spot in an urban environment is either private property or explicitly illegal for overnight occupation. Good wind blocks exist underneath highway overpasses, which means DOT or city property where camping is prohibited. Deep building alcoves offer thermal protection, which means trespassing on commercial property. Parking garages have wind-free zones, which means security will roust you within hours. Veterans handle this through rotation and discretion, never the same spot 2 nights straight, never visible from street level if you can avoid it, never there when business opens in the morning. Caloric thermogenesis, the 3,000+ calorie cold survival requirement. Now here's where things get clever in ways most people never think about. Your body is a furnace, and furnaces need fuel. In normal temperatures, you burn roughly 2,000 calories per day just existing. In extreme cold, that number jumps to 3,000 or more because your body is constantly generating heat to maintain core temperature. Shivering alone burns 400 calories per hour. That's not exercise. That's your body's involuntary response to cold stress, your muscles contracting rapidly to generate warmth through friction and metabolic activity. If you're not replacing those calories, your internal furnace runs out of fuel and core temperature starts dropping. This is where the hidden problem hits hardest. Food scarcity during winter months. Shelter kitchens close early because staff needs to get home before dark. Donation sites have limited hours. Food pantries require paperwork and addresses many people don't have. So the working solution becomes high-fat, high-calorie foods that store without refrigeration and pack maximum energy per ounce. A jar of peanut butter costs $3 and contains 3,000 calories, an entire day's cold weather fuel requirement in one container. Granola bars run about $5 for a box of 12, each bar providing 200 to 300 calories of quick energy. Why this matters is counterintuitive. Eating before bed fights hypothermia. Every piece of conventional wisdom says don't eat before sleeping because it disrupts rest. In cold weather, that advice will kill you. Your body needs fuel to maintain temperature during sleep when you're not generating heat through movement. The measurement is stark. Without adequate calories, body temperature can drop 1 to 2 degrees overnight. That might not sound like much until you realize the difference between 97 degrees core temp and 95 degrees is the difference between cold and early stage hypothermia. The complication is that high-calorie foods are expensive relative to available resources, and there's no guarantee of access on any given day. The veteran method is stockpiling shelf-stable items whenever possible. Peanut butter, crackers, granola, anything with long shelf life and high caloric density. Not for tomorrow, but for the nights when there's nothing else. Yet all these calories mean nothing if you pour poison into the furnace instead of fuel. The alcohol paradox: why feeling warm means you're dying. Here's something most people never consider, and it's deadly. Alcohol feels like it warms you up. You take a drink and within minutes you feel flush, warm, almost comfortable despite the cold. Your skin tingles with heat, The shivers stop. Everything in your immediate perception says, "This is working. Alcohol is helping me survive this cold night." And that perception is killing you. What's actually happening is alcohol dilating your blood vessels, particularly the ones near your skin surface. Blood rushes to your extremities and skin, creating that warm sensation you're feeling. Meanwhile, blood that should be concentrated in your core, protecting your vital organs and maintaining central body temperature, is being diverted to your skin where it cools rapidly and returns to your core colder than it left. The scientific reality is that alcohol accelerates core heat loss even as it creates the sensation of warmth. It's your body lying to you, or more accurately, your perception system misinterpreting vascular changes. A 10-year study of hypothermia victims found that most people who freeze to death are intoxicated at the time. Not coincidentally intoxicated, causally intoxicated. They felt warm because of alcohol's effect on their blood vessels, removed layers of clothing because they were too hot, and passed out in positions where they couldn't maintain warming protocols. By morning, their core temperature had dropped below survivable levels. The study findings are brutal. In New York City, which averages 15 cold weather deaths per year, 25 to 50% of victims are alcohol-related. In Portland and Seattle, outreach workers report the same pattern every winter. The rookie mistake pattern is consistent. Person drinks for warmth, feels flush and comfortable, makes poor decisions about clothing and location, falls asleep and doesn't wake up, or wakes up with black fingers and toes that will require amputation. Veterans who've survived multiple winters know the rule. Avoid alcohol entirely in sub-freezing conditions. 0. The alternative is hot liquids without alcohol, coffee and tea from shelters, hot water from fast food restaurant bathrooms heated in the cup, anything that warms from the inside without dilating blood vessels. Alcohol isn't a comfort, it's a trap. But even with perfect technique, dry clothes, wind protection, full stomach, zero alcohol, there's one vulnerability that no amount of individual skill can overcome. Mental vigilance, the apathy that kills. Before the cold, hypothermia doesn't just kill the body, it attacks the mind. The classic signs of cognitive decline from cold are known as the umbles: stumbling, mumbling, fumbling, and grumbling. When your brain gets cold, your decision-making fails. You might decide it's too much work to do your warming cycle. You might stop caring that your feet are numb. You might convince yourself that sleeping just a little longer won't hurt, that mental surrender is more dangerous than any wind chill. The apathy of the cold is a well-documented phenomenon in polar exploration, and it's just as real on a city street in Boston or Milwaukee. Once you stop caring, you stop surviving. Veterans use mental anchors to stay vigilant. A specific routine, a shared responsibility with a buddy, or even a deep-seated anger at the situation that keeps them alert. This vigilance also applies to the logistics of tomorrow. A survivor is always thinking about the next night. If it's raining today, where will I find dry cardboard for tonight? If the shelter is full, which building has the best wind shadow? This constant mental calculation is exhausting, and it's why survival fatigue is so dangerous. It only takes one night of being too tired to follow the protocol to lose a foot. The engineering of survival is as much about the mind as it is about the materials. And this is exactly why the final piece of the survival system isn't a technique or a material. It's another human being. The buddy system. Why no one survives alone? Nobody survives frostbite risk alone. That's just reality, and veterans know it. When you're sleeping in 15-degree temperatures with nothing between you and tissue damage except technique and vigilance, you need someone watching for the signs you can't see. Someone to notice when your lips are turning blue before you lose consciousness. Someone to wake you up for scheduled hand-warming cycles when exhaustion has you sleeping through your internal alarm. This is where community and partnership strategy becomes survival infrastructure. Paired sleeping isn't about companionship, it's about shared body heat and mutual monitoring. Two people in adjacent sleeping positions can share thermal space, cutting individual heat loss by significant margins. But the benefits go beyond the obvious physics. Check-in systems within encampments create safety networks where veterans do morning welfare checks, making sure everyone made it through the night. 30-minute wake protocols where partners take turns maintaining alertness, watching for hypothermia symptoms in each other, and enforcing warming cycles even when the other person is too exhausted to care are standard practice. The psychological benefits matter too. The will to survive is stronger when someone else is counting on you. This is hidden knowledge that exists outside official social services, passed person to person in encampments and street communities that outsiders never see. Avoiding frostbite without shelter isn't about one magic solution. It's ground insulation with 3 to 4 layers of cardboard protected by plastic sheeting and scavenged closed-cell foam that veterans fight over because they know the difference between materials that save lives and materials that absorb water and kill. It's loose clothing layers that trap air instead of restricting blood flow, and moisture management through vapor barriers and newspaper stuffing that prevents the slow, invisible dampness buildup that degrades your entire system over days. It's extremity protection with scheduled warming cycles every 20 to 30 minutes, regardless of how numb you feel, and location engineering to find wind-blocked spaces that can feel 20 degrees warmer than exposed positions 50 feet away. Add caloric fuel through peanut butter and granola bars that keep your internal furnace running when you're burning 400 extra calories per hour just shivering, and the discipline to avoid alcohol despite the false warmth it promises while actually accelerating the heat loss that kills you. Layer in mental vigilance against the apathy that creeps in when your brain gets cold enough to stop caring whether you live or die. Combine all of that with buddy system monitoring where community members check on each other through the night and into the morning, and you get an engineered survival system that keeps people alive through winter without heated shelter. This is human creativity and adaptation under extreme pressure. It's applied physics and thermodynamics calculated on the fly by people who never took an engineering class, but learned through experience what keeps fingers attached and what leads to amputation. It's survival knowledge that shouldn't have to exist, knowledge that represents a failure of social systems to protect vulnerable people from deadly exposure. But it does exist, passed through street communities and homeless encampments from Portland to Philadelphia, refined over decades by people who had no choice except to figure it out or die. It's not romantic. It's not inspiring in the feel-good sense. It's a testament to what human beings are capable of when survival depends on ingenuity, community, and the refusal to surrender to a world that forgot about them. 700 people a year don't make it. The ones who do carry knowledge that most of us will never need, and that none of them should have had to learn. Picture this. It's 2 a.m., 15 degrees outside, and your toes aren't tingling. They're gone, sacrificed so your heart can keep beating. In 30 minutes, frostbite turns permanent. Black skin, dead nerves, amputation. Yet some survive this night after night. No shelter, no hospital, just knowledge, grit, and the frozen ground. A veteran on the streets of Chicago showed me a trick that saved his fingers for 5 winters. It costs $0, takes 20 seconds, and by the end of this video, you'll know more about surviving extreme cold than most emergency room physicians. This isn't just about enduring the cold, it's about a high-stakes application of physics and human biology, where every decision, from where you sit to how you tie your shoes, determines whether you wake up with all your digits intact.